هنا صوت فلسطين، صوت الشعب الفلسطيني.
This is the Voice of Palestine, the voice of the Palestinian people.
Good evening and welcome to the new web-based Voice of Palestine. It's October 29th, 2012, and I'm your co-host, Hanna Qawas. Our special guest today is Jim Manley from Nanaimo, BC, who just returned from sailing on the Gaza-bound aid ship Estelle, which was boarded and abducted by the Israeli military forces. We will also be talking with his wife Eva about her impressions. Good day, Jim, and welcome to the Voice of Palestine.
Well, thank you very much, and hello to all your listeners.
To start with, could you tell us about a background about yourself and what really motivated you to join the Estelle?
Well, I'm a retired United Church minister. I also served for 8 years as a New Democratic Party Member of Parliament for a Vancouver Island riding. And during that time, I was the spokesperson for my party for Aboriginal Affairs. And I was also, for a brief time, spokesperson for fisheries and also for international development. Both Eva and I have had a long involvement with First Nations people in Canada and also with peoples in Latin America, in Central America and South America, and concern for justice there. For a long time, we avoided any involvement with the whole question of Israel and Palestine. It was a subject we didn't want to get involved with. We said it was too complicated. We just didn't want to touch it, largely because of the fear of anti-Semitism, of being called anti-Semite. And we have gradually overcome that, and there were a number of ways in which we did that. We heard a series of speakers. We read books. One of the more influential books that I read was Amira Haas's book, Drinking the Sea at Gaza. And she's an Israeli journalist, the only Israeli journalist who really lived in Gaza and reported on what is actually happening to the Gazan people. And she tells a story about her mother, who was in a concentration camp and being transferred from Belgrade to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, and as they were getting off the train and being forced to march, she said there was a whole group of German women, some walking, some in bicycles, who just stood and watched with kind of an indifferent curiosity. And when Amira Haas heard this story as a little girl, she determined, that she would never simply be a bystander just watching and not doing anything. And so Eva and I have gradually become more involved in the whole question of Palestinian rights and the situation in the West Bank, the occupied West Bank, and the situation of the Palestinian people of Gaza. And when we heard some speakers about the situation in Gaza who had gone into Gaza last spring through the tunnels, and they told us some of the situation there. And then at the end of the meeting, they asked us, and this was just in September, not very long ago, they asked if I would be willing to be the Canadian representative on the Estelle. And I was a bit taken aback. I hadn't even considered such an idea. And Eva and I talked about it a lot, over supper. And Eva encouraged me from the very beginning that this was something that was important and something that I should consider doing. And so I agreed. It was something, that I wanted to do on the one hand, but was a little bit hesitant about on the other. And we agreed that I would do it. And so we let them know. And on October the 3rd, I had a kind of a brief farewell gathering of friends in Vancouver Airport and flew to Rome and took the train to Napoli and joined the Estelle.
Yeah, just something you mentioned about, the fear of anti-Semitism, it was enough to stop many people of really doing support work for Palestine. I guess the Zionists really use and abuse the Holocaust in their favor, so they'll silence any criticism or opposition to Israeli policies. But
that's a very unfortunate fact, and there are still many people who are afraid of that. I have friends in the United Church who will not get involved in this because they say that we're involved in Christian-Jewish dialogue, and they can't risk that by discussing Israel's relationship with the Palestinian people.
Yeah, actually,
and how can you have a dialogue if you're not willing to talk about what is most important?
Yeah, but this logic also plays into anti-Semitism, and that's saying basically they are saying that what the Zionists are doing, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, etc., they are doing it in the name of the Jewish people, which really increases anti-Semitism. So their logic is anti-Semitic. It's not the other way around. To confront Zionism and Zionist practices is really not anti-Semitic. It's criticizing the state of Israel and saving the Jews from the libeling that the Zionists are doing to them.
Well, I don't believe that criticizing the state of Israel is anti-Semitic any more than criticizing the actions of the American government is anti-American, or criticizing the actions of our Canadian government is un-Canadian. We should be able to criticize the actions of any state when they violate international human rights, which is what is happening in a terrible way to the occupied West Bank and to Gaza.
And we shouldn't allow them to use such terms where they really, they are the ones who are serving the cause of the anti-Semites, because, it goes way back in history, even to the Herzl, the founder of the Zionist movement, where he stated clearly that the anti-Semites are his allies, basically. So anti-Semitism and Zionism are two faces for the same coin, really, and they feed on each other. But having said that, I'd like to move to your experience on the journey on the Estelle. Could you tell us what happened and how many people were on the ship and who were on it?
Well, first of all, we were very glad when we were finally able to sail from Naples, because the Israeli government had tried to prevent the Estelle from sailing at a previous Italian port, and I think that there was some concern that they might have undue influence on the Italian government and keep us from sailing. And then we were to pick up some additional people just outside of Greece. but we made a special point of staying outside of Greek waters because last year, as you know, when the Freedom Flotilla was trying to sail to Gaza, boats, including the Canadian boat, the Trahir, were stopped at Greece. So it was important that we stay in international waters. And we had a crew that was originally from Sweden, Norway, and Finland, and along the way they picked up people who were from Spain, from Italy, from Greece, and myself. And this included 5 members of Parliament, as well as myself as a former member of Parliament, members of Parliament from Norway, from Sweden, from Spain, and from Greece, 2 of them from Greece. And there were 3 former Israeli Defense Force members there, young people, who had served their obligatory time in the Israeli Defense Force, and they'd seen the wrong that was being done by the IDF against the Palestinian people, and they have taken a very courageous position in opposing this and in coming on board the Estelle. And we were sailing, all of us made a commitment to nonviolence. We were completely nonviolent. We took training in nonviolence, but we were also deeply committed to helping to raise the blockade at Gaza, that we recognized that this blockade was an inhuman act, that it was wrong, it was illegal, it was immoral, it was choking the whole economy of the people of Gaza and choking their future, so they couldn't live with freedom and dignity. So we were committed to nonviolence, but we were also committed to doing all we could to raise that siege. And the reason that the Estelle was used as a sailing boat was that it's a completely nonviolent symbol. How could this be regarded as a threat to Israel? Nevertheless, when we were still in international waters, we weren't even in the waters that Israel illegally claims for itself. When we were still in international waters, we were overtaken by Israeli gunboats with a helicopter, a landing barge, and I have no idea how many Defense Force personnel there were there, but they were all wearing balaclava masks, indicating that they knew that what they were doing was a criminal action, and they did not want to be recognized so that they could be charged in an international court. So they knew that this was an illegal action, and we resisted them in a nonviolent way, and a lot of the resistance took place just outside the wheelhouse at one of the doors to the wheelhouse, and there were a number of people that were standing in front of this to prevent the Israeli Defense Forces from taking charge of the boat. So, after they had landed on board and overpowered some of the people that were on the lower deck, they came up, and they weren't able to get to this door until they tasered several people. Yeah. And a total of 11 people were tasered, including 2 senior citizens. Yeah. I wasn't tasered myself. I was at another door, and I was face-to-face with Israeli Defense Force personnel, but I wasn't physically harmed.
Yeah, it's a mockery, really.
But other people were.
Yeah, it's a mockery, really, to call them Israeli Defense Force, knowing.
Well, yes, that's true.
Yeah.
However, the Israeli Defense Force shares that mockery with a number of nations around the world, including Canada.
Yeah, that claim they are defending their people rather than waging aggressions all over the world. Yeah.
Right.
So anybody was here then with the tasering, because some of these tasers are quite deadly.
Well, I think it really shook some of the people up. Some of them, I think, were young men, and it was a shock to them. But there was one woman who was a senior citizen, and she was tasered, and I think it was a really brutal thing to have done to her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there were some Israelis who were tasered also.
Yes. My understanding is that one of the young Israeli men was tasered by the Israeli forces, that he was tasered 5 times. And now I can't verify that. That's what I've heard.
Yeah. So they didn't care really whether you are Jewish or non-Jew, Israeli or non-Israeli. As long as you're trying to do humanitarian work, you are the enemy basically to them.
That's right. And this was a very shameful act. And I think that a lot of the defense or the armed forces that were there, I think that they were ashamed of what they had to do. And we were taunting them. How could they go home and brag to their mothers that today I was part of a mass attack on an unarmed sailing ship.
Yeah.
But one of the things that they did that struck me as being extremely foolish, as well as being illegal, was they took down the Finnish flag. It was a boat that was sailing under the Finnish flag. They took that flag down, which is a crime under international law, and they raised the Israeli flag. And I would think that Israelis and Jews around the world would be deeply ashamed of this action because we've always associated the skull and crossbones with piracy, and here it was, they're running up the Jewish flag after having seized this boat illegally as an act of piracy.
Actually, it's not a Jewish flag; it's an Israeli flag.
It's an insult to their own flag.
Yeah. And again, they're trying basically to claim that they reclaimed the ship, and they really, like the pirates, like you said, they took over the ship, and what happened to the ship after that? And could you tell us what happened? We'll talk about the ship maybe later, after you tell us what happened. And they took you to Ashdod, I believe.
Well, they herded us all down. They took my passport and my wallet, my papers, and they herded us all down. First of all, to the foredeck, and then they crowded us all into a small space in the afterdeck. And they kept us there. They weren't able to run the boat. The mate managed to shut down the engine, and they didn't know how to sail it, and they couldn't get the engine started, so they had to tow us into Ashdod. And it took a long time, and then it took 3 tugboats to kind of ease us toward the dock. And when we got there, we were supposed to pick up our bags and our passports, and they couldn't find my passport. And so I was the last person off the boat, and they were rummaging around, going through garbage, rummaging through different bags, trying to find my passport. And it turns out, when I finally got off the boat, after I insisted on a letter saying that they couldn't find it, when I finally got off the boat, it turned out that one of the Greek MPs found it in his bag where they'd placed it by mistake. So, there were a lot of stupid actions on their part. They weren't that efficient. We were taken, and we were processed, through customs, and they went through all our bags looking for something dangerous. I don't think they found anything anywhere. But they went through all our bags, made a mess of them. And then they took us to a waiting room, and I was interrogated once by police, who just asked a few basic questions. And then they went for further interrogation that asked questions. And we had received training in nonviolence and also training in how to deal with arrest. And we were told that we could deny, just claim to be silent, that we had that right. And so I said that, I chose to remain silent. So I went back, I was taken back to the room, and then they took me later to another interrogation, and I understand that this one was by Mossad. This was very early the following morning, and I'd been up since 3 the morning before and just had a 2-hour nap, so I was very tired. But we went there, and I was facing one interrogator, and then I had another one sitting over on my right hand, and there were 2 stenographers behind. And they tried to disconcert me with the kind of questions they asked, because they knew all about me. They had files and so on, so they knew that I had a wife, that I had children, and so on. So they asked, "Do you have a wife?" To remind me of the fact that yes, of course I have a wife. Do you have children? Do you have grandchildren? Would you like to talk to your wife? And after each of these questions, I answered that I chose to remain silent. And so then they began to taunt me for being kind of American in the way I chose not to answer, the way Americans chose not to answer the McCarthy hearings by invoking the Fifth Amendment. And eventually they gave up and sent me back. I didn't have anything to tell them anyhow, and they knew that, but they just wanted to kind of break me. Some of the others received more difficult questioning, and they took me back to the room, and then they said, that I would be imprisoned, and so they took us in a vehicle to a detention center and placed us in a cell. But one of the people who was one of the organizers, and he was Jewish himself, but he'd given up his Israeli citizenship a number of years ago and, claimed Swedish citizenship. They took him back to Ashdod and then transferred him to Ashkelon, where he was given a lot of interrogation, and they tried to charge him with treason when he wasn't even an Israeli citizen. And thankfully, some of their judges are still standing firm for legal rights for prisoners. And the judge says, he's not even an Israeli citizen. How can you charge him with treason?
Actually, it's aiding the enemy.
Aiding the enemy, And the same, they tried to charge the 3 young Israelis with aiding the enemy. But how could they charge them with that when all that was happening was that they were on a peaceful sailing ship that was arrested in international waters? And so, we had a good lawyer, Gabby Lasky, who has handled a lot of these kind of cases before. And so that case against those 3 was thrown out. But then they keep looking for some other loophole under which they can charge people.
Actually, they released them. They released all the Israelis before you or the rest of the other people.
But they keep wanting to find some way of charging them, and they're going to face a lot of discrimination back in their own country.
For sure, for sure. So after that, we hear that they released some people from the international participants before others, and you were one of the last ones. Could you tell us a bit why they did that? And
well, I think that the Greek consul was there, to meet the boat and advised them to sign a document to leave. And we wanted to consult our lawyer before we signed the document. And then when the one person, Drur, had been taken back to Ashdod and Ashkelon for further questioning, we determined that we weren't going to leave until he had been returned. And I determined, that I had joined this group in solidarity, and I wasn't going to leave until he was returned either, until all of us were able to leave together. And so that was my decision. I suppose I could have left a few hours earlier, but I think in a venture like this, it's really important to have solidarity and to stand together rather than for everybody just to kind of get out as quickly as they can themselves and never mind their brothers and sisters. I mean, we're there in solidarity with the Gazan people, and we have to be in solidarity with ourselves in order to show a united front.
So these documents that they ask you to sign, I hear that in them they say you admit that you entered Israel illegally. I mean,
yes.
Is that okay? I mean, it's really outrageous. They kidnap you from the middle of the sea, and they bring you to Israel, and they claim that you entered Israel illegally. How this?
Well, it was illegal, but it wasn't our will. It was theirs.
Yeah.
And the document we finally did sign, was rather innocuous, but all of us insisted on putting a small note at the bottom, in our own handwriting, saying that we had been brought into Israel against our will after having been taken illegally on international waters.
Good.
So we wanted that to be quite explicit.
Yeah, so that's how people signed it then. They didn't really fall for their story there that, No,
I think we were very well trained in what we could do and what we should do, so that if we hadn't had that training and they isolated us one by one, it would have been much more difficult. But as it was we were committed to staying together, and we knew that we had certain basic rights, such as the right to remain silent.
Yeah, and was the document in Hebrew or in English?
In both. The original document was in both, and then the other document was simply in English.
Actually, you're lucky, because with the Palestinians, they make them sign Hebrew documents without even understanding what they are. So, but could you tell us a bit about the conditions in the detention center and how long you stayed there?
Well, I was in the detention center for about 3 days, and quite frankly, the detention center wasn't that bad, and I know that a lot of prisoners face really horrendous conditions. But for us, that wasn't the case. We were given half-decent food. We found the building terribly noisy. It had metal doors and metal walls all around, so that there was terrible echoing all night when you're trying to sleep. But the conditions weren't that bad. We were able to get out into a courtyard 2 times a day where we, could meet with one another and talk.
Good. I guess they abandoned their policy which they used with the Mavi Marmara, because they won't allow people to go to the bathroom like what happened with Kevin Nietzsche to try to break him.
Well, we had a bathroom in the cell. With a squat toilet.
That's good to hear. At least they learned their lesson, not to be so brutal.
But the story isn't about the conditions that I faced in the prison. The story is about what happens and is still happening to the people of Gaza. And that's where we need to really continue to put the emphasis. The people of Gaza continue to suffer.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, last week we interviewed Dr. Haider Eid from Gaza, and I asked him about these ships and flotillas that come to Gaza, and he said he emphasized categorically of the importance of such gestures, because it makes the people of Gaza feel that they are not alone, and they are,
absolutely,
and they feel even if it failed, at least they feel that people think of them and they are concerned about their situation.
Well, you know, I learned a word when we visited the occupied Palestinian West Bank last May and June. We learned a word, sumud, meaning steadfastness and perseverance and finding some way to overcome this kind of oppression.
Yeah.
And the Palestinian people have shown sumud, and I think it's important for the people around the world to continue to show that. And, you know, the people who organized the flotilla and supported the Estelle, and the Canadians who are working to help the Gaza's Ark project, you know, I think that there's that whole quality of sumud is with us too. We will persevere until that blockade is lifted.
Yeah, the ship carried some, you know, medical supplies, etc. Could you tell us about, in general, the content of the ship? And I heard mentioning the Ark. There were equipment to try to build the ship, the Ark ship in Gaza. And what happened to all these equipment and the ship itself?
Well, the Canadian contribution was an anchor that would be donated to the Gaza's Ark. The Gaza's Ark is a project, you know, that's being supported internationally. Canada is helping to support it, to help the Palestinian people rebuild a boat that will be used to carry Gazan goods, trade goods, to different customers in Europe, and thus help to break the blockade from the inside. So we were contributing that anchor. In addition, the bulk of our cargo was cement. The people of Gaza have not been able to receive building supplies ever since Operation Cast Lead, the Israeli bombing raids of 2008-2009, when hundreds of homes were destroyed, when schools were destroyed, when their water facilities, their sanitation facilities were destroyed, and they have not been rebuilt. So we had a cargo that had a lot of cement that would be a token towards rebuilding. You know, they need a lot more than what we had. We're a comparatively small ship. We also had some balls so that the children would, you know, be able to play games, and there were some medical supplies. But the humanitarian aid that we had was really a token. The people of Gaza cannot survive on humanitarian aid. They can't survive on the tunnel economy. They need to be able to trade internationally. And the whole purpose of the blockade is to choke off that trade so the people of Gaza find it's almost impossible to live there. And that's why that blockade has to be lifted. You know, humanitarian aid isn't enough. The Israelis say that these goods will be passed on to the people of Gaza, but we have no confidence in that whatsoever, that all of the things we had in the boat will go to them. They've said that about previous boats, but I don't think that all of the goods that were on board were passed on.
they're still holding the Tahrir. So if they want,
yes, that's right.
And what's happening with the Estelle? I guess depending on the position of the Finnish and the Swedish government, whether it will be returned or not, because the Turkish government was successful in reclaiming the Mavi Marmara, but not the Canadian government. So could you tell us, I'm sure it's still under siege, being sieged.
I think it's still, as far as I know, it's still being held. And the Norwegian government has spoken out very strongly against the whole act of piracy that took place there. And I think that some of the Finnish government and the Swedish government have been a bit slower in doing so, but I think that they will be forced by their own citizens to speak out, and to certainly the affront to the Finnish flag is not something that any sovereign nation can accept. So I'm sure that they will be insisting upon the return of the boat, but I don't have any up-to-date information on that myself.
Yeah, it was really a pleasure to talk to you, Jim, and maybe we could get back to you at the end after we talk with Eva.
Okay, well, I'll just call Eva over here now.
Yeah, could you put
and it was a pleasure to have a chance to explain what happened on the boat, and here's Eva.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Eva.
Hi.
Yeah, I wanted really to talk to you on this issue, but also you were part of a pilgrimage of solidarity last May, and I believe May or end of April, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was the end of April and the beginning of May.
Yeah, and I'd like to talk about your impression. You went to the West Bank. Where did you visit? And you had a delegation from mainly from around BC, isn't it?
Right. We had one from Alberta, 3 from Toronto, and the rest were from British Columbia.
Yeah. Could you tell us a bit about it and about your impression? Because we really didn't have a chance to talk to anybody since
we've been there.
Yeah, since you've been there, about this pilgrimage of solidarity. Could you tell us a bit what's the objective and what's the aim of the and where did you visit and who did you meet?
Well, we. Jim and I, as Jim mentioned, have been doing a tremendous amount of reading in the last 3 years. So we have quite strong impressions from reading books like Michael Riordan's book, Our Way to Fight, which is full of interviews with Palestinians and Israelis who work in solidarity with Palestinians. But it was really important to meet the people who are going through the experiences, to meet people in their own situations. And we spent 3 days in Nazareth. And we then spent 3 days in Jerusalem, and then the last 5 in Bethlehem.
That's my hometown, by the way.
Oh, Bethlehem's your hometown.
That's right, yeah.
Well, and one of the things that they lament is that many, many people have emigrated.
Yeah, that's true.
And the first night we were in Bethlehem, we were invited to a private home. Our group was 12, and we were broken into 3 groups, and we met with families and had dinner with them. And they talked about the fact that Christians in particular you know how well-educated Palestinians are. They really value education. And so there are many skilled Palestinians who speak fluent English, and they are being enticed to immigrate to places like Canada and Australia. And their feeling is that the authorities would like to see the Palestinian Christians leave because it's harder to attack. In North America, it's harder to attack Christians than it is to attack Muslims.
Yeah.
And they felt it was important for them to stay, and they are working with their Muslim brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And in Bethlehem, there's a place called the Story House. It's the Arab Education Center.
Mm-hmm.
And they work primarily with women and with young people. And they used to work with people from all three faiths, but gradually they have been cut off from contact with Israelis who used to be their friends, because the wall and the lack of access to Jerusalem, which is where many of their friends are, makes it almost impossible for them to continue this communication.
Yeah, actually, I just want to clarify something. The Palestinian Christians were forced to leave, whether through the military action in '67 or the economic squeeze that put on the Palestinian people. And they claim that they're concerned about the Christians, which is like the Christian Zionists and the senators in the U.S. claim that the Palestinian Christian left because of the Muslims, which is nonsense. They were forced to leave, and not just that, I mean, they are forbidden to go back, which is the crucial point.
That's right.
If I want to go back now, although in spite of the Oslo process and the signing and giving Bethlehem back to the Palestinian Authority, still all Palestinians who left Bethlehem or any other town, whether Christians or Muslim, that applies also to the Muslim, they're not allowed to go back. I mean, obviously, if they want peace, they let at least these people forget about, although it's important, the refugees from 48, but let's forget about them. And they're not allowing even the refugees from 67 to return, which shows that they have designs over the territory,
whole of the land.
All of the land, and they don't give a damn about Palestinian Christians, let alone Palestinian Muslims. So
it's lip service. The other thing is that it's not true that the Palestinians have control of Bethlehem, because we had people tell us that if the Israeli military want to make raids, they tell the Palestinian police officers to go home, and then they go in and do home invasions during the night.
Or some of the security services do the job for them, because they are trained by the Canadian security forces and the American security forces under the late Dayton, the American General Dayton. So I mean, it's nonsense.
We heard one story. This happened to a family 3 years ago.
Yeah.
He was at work. She phoned him at work and said, "Don't even try to come home. Our neighborhood is completely surrounded by the Israelis, and you won't be able to get through." Yeah. But the little boy, who was 4, heard her and said he wanted to talk to his dad, and he pleaded with his dad to come home. He said, "Daddy, I need you, please come home." And so his dad tried to get home, but they wouldn't let him through. And during his absence, the Israeli military raided the home and held a gun to the head of the 4-year-old. Now, that child is completely traumatized. And the family is torn, really torn. How can we help this child recover from this trauma? And how can we continue the work that we are doing in our community that we think is important?
I would ask to what kind of a human being would do such a thing to a child. Really.
That's right. That's a very important
I think it's important that, if you don't have any more highlights about your pilgrimage, I'd like to move to what happened to Jim on the Estelle and your feeling about it. But if you want to talk a bit more about your impressions, then that's
well, one of the things that we had been aware of before, but that really came home to us was the speeding up of house demolitions.
Mm-hmm.
We were at a meeting with somebody from the Jerusalem Council of Churches, and our meeting was interrupted by a phone call that he received saying that their family celebration of the baptism of their niece could not take place at the restaurant they intended to have it at, a barbecue restaurant, because it had been bulldozed at 4 o'clock that morning.
Mm-hmm.
And we spoke with an ecumenical accompanier who said that a home had just been bulldozed because they had added, without a permit, they had added a small bathroom to the outside wall, and so the house was bulldozed.
Yeah.
And then one day I met somebody who had witnessed 5 house demolitions in one day. This is when we went to a Women in Black vigil in Jerusalem. And so it just, in the short time that we were there, all of this activity was taking place, and it's not in the international media.
No.
We only hear one version of events. We do not hear about constant harassment and killing.
And their silence is really complicity in these war crimes, because whether the media or the Canadian government, they are complicit really, because their silence is deafening. I think it's really important for people really to go there and see for themselves, because I'm sure it was a life-changing trip for you to go to Palestine.
I'm sure that one of the reasons why we both felt that the Estelle voyage was important for Jim to participate in is that we are already very aware of the kind of things that are happening to the people in the West, the occupied territories in the West Bank, and we had seen a film about Gaza called Tears of Gaza at a documentary film festival in Vancouver 2 or 3 years ago. And it was made by a young Norwegian filmmaker who was in Gaza making a film about children when the bombing began. And she ended up making a film about the bombing of Gaza, even though that wasn't what she set out to do. And, there was an international hue and cry about that, but the ongoing harassment, the ongoing bombing, the low-level flights that are causing children to have serious hearing problems, the problem of malnutrition in the Gaza Strip, and how that is permanently damaging the future of many children.
As I mentioned to Jim, we were talking with Dr. Haider Eid from Gaza last Tuesday, and while we were talking with him, there were bombardment, and they killed 3 Palestinian civilians, 2 in Gaza and 1 in Rafah. So the aggression continues. But I'd like to move on. We're really getting short on time. About your impression of what happened to the Estelle, and I heard you. I read in the Georgia Strait you were very critical of the Canadian government and especially the NDP. Could you tell us a bit about it? And it seems they don't care, or they prefer their self-interest rather than humanity to their work.
I expected that there would be good consular services, even though we have a conservative government, because I think consular service people try their best to be helpful when Canadians are in trouble in other countries. My initial phone call was a bit of a shocker, because I thought that because I've been married to Jim for 53 years, I would be entitled to information about him. And I was told that they are not free to give any information without his signature on a form giving permission for information to be released to me. And that's because of Canada's privacy laws. it's almost as though he were running away from home to get away from me, and so they couldn't give me any information.
Yeah.
But then Jim was visited, and he was given a form to sign, and then I was able to get the information that, yes, he was getting his medication and that he seemed well and seemed to be in good spirits, which brought a lot of relief. But I don't really expect much from the Conservative government because they are completely uncritical when it comes to Israel.
Yeah.
They accept whatever the Israeli administration tells them. I had hoped that the NDP, some of the members are people I consider to be good friends, I had hoped that they would speak out against the boarding of the Estelle. And more than that, I would really like them to speak out about the situation of the people of Gaza. Because we have party policy that says that we are opposed to the occupation and that says that we are opposed to the blockade of the people of Gaza. And so I think if we have party policy, then it should be possible for members of Parliament to speak about that party policy, unless in actual fact they agree with the Harper government. And I don't think they do. Some of the people who have spoken out in the past seem to be having a great deal of difficulty doing so now.
Yeah, they're being terrorized by the media and the Zionists in general. Yeah, but that's no excuse for them not to speak out, because if you don't speak your conscience, you're not a human being, really, to put it mildly.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the things I want to say is that we were overwhelmed by letters of support from all over the place, not just from Canada. A Nobel laureate from Ireland wrote a letter of support. So there were many letters of support. Some of them, people who hadn't seen us in many, many years. And that was appreciated. And the Canadian Boat to Gaza team, which is a national team, could not have been more supportive than they were. They were absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. And
I felt that not only supported, but they made me work hard. Which was a good thing, because otherwise it would have been a much more stressful experience. And I was in Toronto for the last week because I was there for the founding meeting of a new network. It's the United Churches network called United for a Just Peace in Palestine, Israel. And our meetings were held at the same time as a national meeting of independent Jewish voices. And I attended some of their meetings, and they organized a rally outside the Israeli consulate and asked me to speak, and were extremely helpful and supportive as well. So I really, I have to give credit to the people who provided that kind of support.
That's good, and really we appreciate all the work you do, and Jim, and for sure the Palestinian people won't forget you the same way they won't forget or forgive those who are complicit in Israeli war crimes. We thank you, Eva, and say goodbye to Jim, and we hope to see you soon, and keep up the good work.
Yes, and thank you very much for the interview, and the message that I want to send out to people is the work is only just beginning, and all of us need to get engaged.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to talk to you and to Jim.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you for calling.
Bye.
Bye-bye.